to those union funds. We've been successful because of the strength and the power of the unions in the legislative process. But obviously, I think everyone in this room would agree that we need truth in advertising. We need truth when we relate to each other. We need truth when we relate to our spouses, to our families, to our friends. And that's who we are. We're Americans. When we relate to each other as Americans, it has to be truthful. The people have a right to know where that truth is coming from and who's supporting the candidate and why. And for that reason, I would support the change in the federal legislation. Thank you all.
I do look at contributing to political campaigns as freedom of speech. I believe it should be operated a lot like our markets are. I believe there should be full disclosure. That quick? I was being really slow. No, that's fine. But what I would like to mention, though, is I really think that the caps ought to be off of my personal contributions. If I choose to give $10,000 to a candidate, I ought to be able to give $10,000 to a candidate. But I would also tell you that my name ought to be attached to the money and the amount given. I think it ought to be full disclosure. But I think the way we limit things today creates other problems for us. People have always found ways around what you intend to try to do. We're creative. It's what makes us a great country. It's also one of our Achilles heels because we're not creative. But I would tell you, just to ask, would I disclose? Absolutely. Do I think everyone should disclose? Yes, both who and how much. Would I support a law that would take the cap off? Absolutely. As long as it's disclosed who's getting the money and how much they're in fact giving. There's someone today raising a lot of money, and it's not necessarily coming in large chunks of $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. It's coming in $1,500 increments over the internet and through other methods. So it proves that not just big money at all times dominates the election process. And I'll leave you time on the clock.
This is an interesting question, and quite frankly, I really like it. I agree with the fact that I think, as an example, the King Fine Goal, what did it do? It gave rise to what is now known as the 527s. And you've got the individuals like George Sowards, who are incredibly liberal, that are billionaires, that are just throwing all kinds of money. It's a little more complex question than what these gentlemen may understand. Number one, would I support knocking the caps off and allowing people to give? Yes. But I also agree everything should be disclosed. There should be one spot where everybody can go and they can see what every single person has contributed. But then you've got additional things like the 527s. You've got things like independent expenditures. You've got things like there's other types of campaigning that goes on that groups can do. And in fact, looking at independent expenditures for a moment, that's exactly what it is. It's separate. The candidate cannot know that it's going on until all of a sudden the commercials are airing or the ads are showing or whatever the case may be. And that entity has already committed all the money, already made all the buys. So the candidate has no knowledge that that in fact has happened. But what needs to happen is when that happens, then full disclosure is given and put wherever it is that we can have access to it. I would submit someplace on the internet. I think we need to get rid of the McCain-Feingold bill, all the bills that restrict the $2,300, all that stuff, and just that way you see exactly where is it looped around. One huge area is the unions. The unions bypass it day and night. So everybody else is doing it right. Everybody else is doing it legal. Everybody else is trying to do it in a moral and ethical way. We get hammered because, in my opinion, the unions are going around and doing it in a different way. So we've got to have a clearinghouse where you can find out everybody that's donated in any situation and everybody to any organization and everybody that's donated to the candidate. Thank you.
Before Mr. Dunn comes up, we have the results from today's municipal election. The gross receipts tax passed, 925 for, 868 against. In District 7, Ron Griggs, 225, Bill Brogan, 184, and Gilbert Heredia, 45. Those are the results. Mr. Dunn.
pretty interesting question because it has a lot to do with what's going on in the race here in the 2nd Congressional District. Would you support changing the federal law? Yes, I would, to make sure that everybody knows where the money's coming from. Will my campaign disclose? Yes, we will. But the bigger issue is what's happening in this race here is that there's already been an IE talked about being formed by the National Restaurant Association. And they're talking about bringing in $300,000 to the Southern Congressional District to affect the race. And part of that is it's not, they can't campaign for their candidate, they have to campaign against the other candidates. And so you've got a group of people coming into New Mexico in the 2nd Congressional District that's going to be here just to trash the other candidates that are in the district. So it's an out-of-state money deal coming in to influence the election here. So, you know, I think that's a big issue, and I think there's some things that need to be done so that people know what's going on, and it needs to be fully disclosed. Thank you.
I'm for full disclosure. I saw Ed get $5 out of his wallet, and I told him that at this point I'm not taking any contributions. But I do believe that that should be on the internet. I mean, everything should be on the internet now. I mean, bills that are before Congress, there's no reason why they can't put them on the internet. Let the public analyze and look at these bills, and then log the results, and then it would really do a lot of work that congressmen have to do in finding out about these bills to have an interested public analyzing them. Then we wouldn't have bills passed in Santa Fe with the experience of 20% to get on the ballot, and now all that's changed. No one in this particular race got on the ballot with any other rules than you had to have 20% of the delegates to be on the ballot in the pre-primary, but they changed the rules after we filed. I don't know that that's fair. Regardless, experience isn't always the best thing, but we have experienced a lot of problems with financing rules. There is no slander in a campaign. I mean, there's none of that. We're pretty much free to say what we want. And if we can pull the wool over your eyes and you're blind, then you probably won't mind voting for a partially dim vision politician. But if you have clear vision and you can see well, then you're going to recognize the politicians that have clear vision, and I think you'll be able to also overcome any problems that you might have with overwhelming amounts of money coming into the district to try and buy your vote. It does seem rather strange that you as people that we're going to represent might expect us to spend like drunken politicians in the primary and the pre-primary and then go to Washington and be frugal with your money. Thank you.
I'll tell you a story. Greg noticed I got this $5 bill out of my wallet. I got this from one night over at Cree Meadows at the Lincoln County meeting. And my ranch manager was putting our signs up on our horse trailer. The guy pulls in on a construction pickup that looked like it had about 14 years on it. He jumps out, runs over, and he says, I heard Ed Tinsley speaking out on Gordo once. And he said, I know he understands our issues. That's the $5 bill he gave my ranch manager. I've carried it ever since. You know what I think money is about too in this process? It also lets everybody participate. If you want to participate at $5, you can participate at $5. If you want to participate as an activist, as a volunteer, which many of the people do right here now in Gordo, that's money invested in the race. Or if you want to write a check for $2,300, that's okay too. It's within the law. I also feel that political action committees, whether it's your retailers, I could rattle off a bunch of political action committees that maybe some folks don't think about. It's retailers, hotels, New Mexico Cattle Growers has one, Texas Cattle Feeders has one, automobile dealers, flower shops. Probably every local small business here at some point or another is or part of an association where they can bond together with their $25 contribution and approach an issue that's very important to them. So I think political action committees have a purpose. I found them to be very straightforward. I found them to be very disclosure oriented, and I think the federal law does require that. I would be for any disclosure requirements that are required to tell everybody